World just woke up to a special IPCC report today, which wants to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius rise and talks about key changes in land use, energy, cities, and industry. Unfortunately, all four of these sectors will create climate losers and climate winners. Which brings me to my point that climate change is undoubtedly the greatest challenge to human rights. It poses both direct and indirect threats to human rights. The right to food, the right to water and sanitation, access to affordable or commercial energy, as well as the consequent right to larger development. Issues such as forced mass migration, climate linked conflict situations, as well as shocks and stressors to health and healthcare systems, the impact on land and livelihoods, all demonstrate that climate change and human rights are closely interwoven. In fact, the right to life of dignity, as well as the right to life itself, are at stake. And even within the global south, the effects are disproportionate. At the heart of the problem of climate change lies a twisted irony. The countries that have been least responsible for the problems are the ones most likely to suffer. At present, almost a third of all yearly human deaths are due to poverty related causes. The situation is only like to get exacerbated in the future with the increasing impacts of climate change. Women and girls make up a disproportionate number of the world's poor, which renders them even more vulnerable. For instance, in my country, in India, where women are predominantly responsible for providing food and water, the impact of climate change on soil fertility, water availability, and food security will have very direct impacts on their rights as well as agency as women. This is only one example, but climate change will widen existing inequalities, which could be lethal for India, where besides gender, caste and class related disparities could also widen. There are two core issues at the heart of this. First is an unwillingness to address issues of environmental inequity and injustice, both between and within countries. And the second is an inability to imagine alternatives to current patterns of economic development. The first category of environmental injustice has to do with the poor and vulnerable facing disproportionate and increasing impacts of environmental change and resource scarcity. The second is the demand for an infinite concept of economic growth on a planet which has very finite resources as well as adaptive capacities. The result is inevitable, its ecological decline. In fact, the environmental narrative or the climate change narrative has been so steeped in the narrative of human rights that I'm kind of surprised that we've not married the two. Which brings me to my last point about what we can do. What we need to do, first off, from a policy level, is to mainstream these issues into each other. Climate change and human rights need to be one narrative. So if you talk about rights to water or access to energy, it needs to show how that affects human rights, human dignity, and the narrative of a human being's life. The second is giving voice to those who will be disproportionately affected. The world cannot respond adequately to climate change unless people and communities are at the center of decision making at all levels local, national, and international. Thank you.